Today we're going to be learning Pesachim Daf Kaf Aleph. This is the Daf for Shabbat. Today's Daf is dedicated by Rella Feldman and Mindy Hecht and family in memory of their beloved husband, father, and Saba, Dr. Charles H. Feldman, Yitzchak Tzvi ben Yaakov Alea Zichrono Livracha, on his 9th Yurtzeit. Our light was extinguished with his passing on the second night of Hanukkah, but his legacy of dedication to family, integrity, love of learning, and inner strength lives on for each of us. He would have been so proud of all of our family members who were involved in Daf Yomi learning and helped build Hadran. May his memory be a blessing. We're going to start now at the bottom of Kaf Amud Bet. We ended with the section that we were talking about. We had wine, the contradiction between Rabbi Yeshua, who talked about wine that was dripping down from a cracked barrel in the top of the wine press, dripping down into the bottom. The top had truma that was pure, and the bottom where it was dripping down into was chulin that was impure. And we wanted to prevent it from getting down. And Rabbi Yeshua said, because of the hefsid merubah, because it's a big loss, that if all of that becomes tameh, it'll be a loss. We basically allow you to collect it into and actually cause impurity by yadayim, to collect the truma into impure vessels, rather than have it mess up all of the chulin that's at the bottom. But then we brought a different source where we tried to show that how do we know that we brought a contradiction. We resolved it by saying there's hefsed merubah, and in another case where it's not a large loss, we're not going to allow that. But then we tried to show how do we know that loss, having a hefsed merubah, is significant, whereas a hefsed mu'at, we're not going to permit things. And we showed the exact same source, which was the continuation of that Mishnah about oil. And since oil is not a big loss, and then we said, why is oil not a big loss? Because oil can be burned and you can benefit from the burning. Whereas the oil, the only way you can benefit from is ziluf, which is sprinkling it, scattering it around so that it will smell nice. To which we said also that would be a use, and therefore it's not such a loss. But then we said maybe we're talking about old wine, new wine, which doesn't yet have a smell. And if we left it laying around for a while, what would happen? You would accidentally come to use it. And that's this whole idea of takala and the concern. We said there's not a concern for oil that you might accidentally use it for other reasons, because you put it in a disgusting utensil and then you know that's the oil that I can only burn, as opposed to what we said by the wine, where you wouldn't put it in a disgusting utensil because you want it to smell nice. To which the Gemara now says, 4 lines from the bottom of Daf Kaf Amud Bet, takala atzma tenai. The fact that one could be concerned, maybe I'll come to use it, is actually a subject of debate. Ditanya, as it says in the following Braita. Chavit shel yayin shel truma shenitmet. What if you have a barrel of wine that became impure? Beit Shammai omrim tishafech chaval. You have to dump the whole thing all at once. Ubeit Hillel omrim ta'aseh ziluf. By the way, with the wine, you don't burn it because wine can't really burn. So whereas normally we burn truma, in this case, you spill it on the ground. So he says you have to spill it right away, Beit Shammai, because we don't want you to accidentally use it. Beit Hillel omrim ta'aseh ziluf. Beit Hillel says, no, sprinkle it around, scatter it around. It'll go into the ground, but it'll smell nice. You can use it and do that with it. And what does it seem to say here? Again, there's a few different ways of interpreting this, as always. But according to Tosfot, there you already see the machloket tanaim. Beit Shammai says you have to dump it. You can't use it at all. And Beit Hillel says, no, you can do ziluf. And he's not worried that you might come to use it. So Beit Hillel seems to say not. And Beit Shammai says, yes, we're worried about it. The downside of this is that if the Gemara is worrying about it and yet they hold like Beit Shammai, that's why Rashi has a bit of a different understanding. He's going to think that it's really the next opinion that holds this, and actually neither Beit Shammai nor Beit Hillel think that that we're worried about takala atzma. But the truth is that's even more difficult because then neither of them hold that way. So I'm not sure that that's what motivated Rashi, as I said a minute ago. But in any case, let's see what Rabbi Yishmael Rabbi Yossi says. So I'm Rabbi Yishmael Rabbi Yossi, ani achreya. I'm going to make the compromise approach between the two of them. If you're in the field, by the time you bring it to your house, time will elapse and you might accidentally come to use it. So there you have to just dump it on the ground. But if you're in your house, taseh ziluf, because you can do the ziluf and you don't have to worry that you might accidentally use it because you do the ziluf right away. Ikeda amre, which then shows that he's clearly concerned for a takala. So when there's no concern for a takala, then no. That's why Rashi says it's specifically him who holds that way. And now we're going to see the reaction in a minute. But before we see that, we're going to have a different version of what he says. Igad amre b'chadash tishafech chaval b'yashan te'aseh ziluf. the distinction is new and old. The new you can't leave because you'll stay for a long time, and therefore you have to dump the whole thing. The old one, since you can use it for ziluf, you can. Again, you can use it immediately. You don't have to worry something's going to happen. Amrulo, the rabbi said to him, the rabbi said, no, your opinion is not a good compromise position. Okay, so a bit of a debate about what this means, but they basically say, we don't accept your compromise position. It's not really a compromise. According to Rashi, it means you're saying something totally different from them. They don't think we're worried about takala, so yours isn't really an in-between position, and therefore they don't accept it. Amar Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina. Now we have another issue here. Machloket shenafla lepachot mimea se'ah chulin. Sorry, let me read the whole sentence. Machloket shenafla lepachot mimea se'ah chulin tme'in. Aval nafla lemea chulin tme'in divrei hakol tereh v'titma v'al yitamena biyad. According to Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina, the whole debate is only now we're going to start learning. I mentioned this before about laws of nullification. This is all only, they have a machloket where Rabbi Yeshua will allow you to collect it in and not let it drop down. That's only if it goes into less than 100. Let's say you have 1 to less than 100. Then what will happen? The truma will mess up the mixture. Okay, the mixture will be messed up. But nafla lemea chulin tme'in divrei kol tereh v'titma. But if it falls into more than 100, then the truma will be nullified, in which case you're not going to have any loss. And therefore, everyone agrees that the whole thing should basically be allowed to go down and you can't stop it in any way. There's also a Braita to support this reading. Tanya Nami Hachi, the Braita reads like this. So again, if you have a barrel that breaks at the top and underneath is 100 times the amount of chulin, Modet Rabbi Eliezer Rabbi Yeshua shem yachol latzil mimeno revi'i b'tahara yatzil v'im lav tereh v'titma v'al yitamena b'yad. So here it says that everybody agrees then that tereh v'titma v'al yitamena b'yad. Even Rabbi Yeshua says you can't do it because again, what will happen? The truma will fall down and it will go right into the chulin and it will be nullified into the chulin. So therefore, we don't allow you to actually impurify it intentionally. First, now the Gemara is going to ask a question on this. Hi, Moja Rabbi Eliezer Rabbi Yeshua. Moja Rabbi Yeshua Rabbi Eliezer Mabayale. Something's weird about this sentence. Now you have to understand that the first way they're reading the sentence is, it says Moja Rabbi Eliezer Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Eliezer agrees with Rabbi Yeshua, admits to him. Now it says two things. That's number one, that if you can collect a revid, a quarter of a log at the top in a pure vessel, then you save that and that's it. And then it says, V'im lav, but if not, tereh v'titma v'al yitamena b'yad. Now they're assuming right now, the Moja Rabbi Eliezer Rabbi Yeshua is referring also to the last line. Now it doesn't make any sense to say that Rabbi Eliezer agrees with Rabbi Yeshua, that if not, then you have to let it trickle down, because Rabbi Eliezer is the one who said that in the other case. It should be Rabbi Yeshua admits to Rabbi Eliezer that in this case, you let it go on its own. So it should be the opposite. So Rav Huna bar Rabbi Yeshua amar laolam lo tepuch. Oh, sorry, I skipped a word. Amar Rava ipuch. So Rava says actually it should be flipped, and you should read Moda Rabbi Yeshua le Rabbi Eliezer that this is the case. Rav Huna bar Rabbi Yeshua says no, laolam lo tepuch. Don't flip it. And in fact, I don't know if you remember this, but in all the other sources, it also said that Moda Rabbi Eliezer le Rabbi Yeshua, which actually some of the texts read Moda Rabbi Eliezer v'Rabbi Yeshua. They both agree about the revid, and that it's really only talking about the first part here. And then it reads like this: Hacha b'mayaskinan b'kli shetochot tahol v'gabot tamei. What it's telling you is, we all agree. Now, what did it say? If you have a kli tahor, a pure vessel, then and you can take a revid out. Everyone agrees that you take a revid in that kli. Now, it's a little bit strange because what are they teaching you? Obviously, if I have a pure kli, I can take it out. So why is it saying that? So the way he reads it is like this. If it was a kli that even Rabbi Eliezer agrees with Rabbi Yeshua that if the kli was not 100% tahor, now what does it mean it's tahor? It's a kli shetochot tahor v'gabot tamei. It's a kli. Now, you'd have to assume, this is based on some things we learned earlier, which is if liquids come in contact with a kli, and remember, if it touches the outside of the kli, the inside doesn't become tamei. So because liquids are all d'Rabbanan, so therefore they only said the outside part of the kli will be tamei. So if a liquid came in contact with the outside, but it tocho tahol v'gabot tamei, the inside is pure. So comes Rabbi Eliezer and he says, even if The outside is tameh. We're still going to allow you to collect a revit in this kli. Maybe you think, just in case the truma touches the outside of the kli, it will be a problem, and therefore we don't allow you to do this at all. Kamashmalan, it comes to teach you that no, in fact, this is allowed. Okay, and that's the chiddush that even Rabbi Eliezer agreed with Rabbi Yeshua that one could do this in a kli tahor, which is not a completely tahor kli. It's got the outside is tameh, and yet we're not concerned. Finished our first parak, and all the more so you should feel good about yourselves that we finished this whole section of Rabbi Chanina Skana Kohanim this last week of learning, which was quite a challenging week. We got through it. I hope that by the end, things were much clearer than when we started. It's a good lesson in understanding that in the Gemara, often at the beginning, you don't understand everything, and over time, things become more clear. And even if you don't finish, as I've said many times, you still don't understand it after learning all this, we'll come back to these topics and these concepts, and the concepts will definitely be more understandable as time goes on. Okay, starting the second parak now, we're continuing back to our issue of checking for chametz and what times one is not allowed to eat chametz on Erev Pesach. Kol sha'ah shemutar le'echol machil lebehema l'chaya u'lofot. Every hour of the day that one is allowed to eat, so one is allowed to give their animals, okay, they're domesticated, non-domesticated, and they're birds. U'mocher le'nochri, you can also sell your chametz at that point to a nochri. Okay, what we're talking about is, we're going to see exactly what does it mean, kol sha'ah shemutar le'echol, and when exactly we're talking about selling to a nochri. It seems like we're talking about once chametz is forbidden, but you don't have to burn it yet. You're allowed to sell it to a non-Jew. Umutar bahana'a, and it's permitted for you to benefit from. Now, this is a little strange because we just said you can give your animal, your birds, you can sell it to a non-Jew. It sounds like it already is mutar bahana'a, so it's allowed to benefit. So what's this adding? We'll have to see. Avar zmano asur bahana'ato. Once the time for eating chametz has passed, though, okay, then asur bahana'a. Once the time for chametz is gone, then you can no longer benefit. V'lo yasikbo tanur v'kirayim. You can't light a fire in your oven. Okay, let's say you want to burn your chametz. This is a great example. Let's say it's freezing out and you're burning your chametz and you want to warm up using the fire. So it's a problem according to this, because once avar zmano, although it would have to be once chametz is actually entirely forbidden, then you can't use this anymore to light up your oven. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, ein bi'or chametz ela sreifa. We learned this before. You must burn it. There's no other way. The mitzvah of bi'or chametz is by burning. V'chachamim omrim af mefarer v'zoreh laruach o metil hayam. You just have to get rid of it in some way. It doesn't have to be by burning. You can scatter it around, right? What will happen? The birds will eat it, or you can throw it in the river and then it's gone. Okay, some people, the Rif has the girsa, the Chachamim don't have the word af. Af means even, which means not only burning, but you can also do it in other ways. According to the Rif, that is specifically the way they do it, and he doesn't think that you should burn it. Maybe because it's unclear exactly why. Some suggest because burning you would actually maybe benefit from, and whereas if you throw it into the sea, you're clearly not benefiting from it at all. Now we're going to start with the kol sha'ah. So the Gemara starts off and says, kol sha'ah shemutar le'echol ma'achil. We actually made reference to this sugya earlier, a few dapim ago. Ha kol sha'ah she'eno mutar le'echol eno ma'achil. It sounds like any time that you're not, and as it says, anytime you're allowed to eat, you can feed your animal. Anytime you're not allowed to eat, eno ma'achil. Well, if that's the case, lema manitin to lo Rabbi Yehuda. It sounds like our Mishnah is not like Rabbi Yehuda. Because what did Rabbi Yehuda say? Di Rabbi Yehuda, ha'ika chamesh, de'eno ochel uma'achil. Ditnan. Remember Rabbi Yehuda said, the whole fifth hour, you're kind of hanging. You don't have to burn it yet, but you also can't eat it. And that means if you don't have to burn it, it means you can benefit from it. And we're going to see that right now. Ditnan, Rabbi Meir Omer, ochlim kol chamesh v'sorfim b'tchilat shesh. You can eat the whole fifth hour. You burn at the beginning of the sixth. So as soon as you stop eating it already, you have to burn it. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, ochlim kol arba v'tolim kol chamesh v'sorfim b'tchilat shesh. No, you can eat until the first 4 hours of the day. Then you wait the fifth hour, which means that you can't eat it, but you can benefit from it. And then you burn it b'tchilat shesh, because then already you're not allowed to benefit. Ve'elamai, Rabbi Meir, wait a minute. So it can't be Rabbi Yehuda, because he's got this hour where you're allowed to feed your animals, you're not allowed to eat. So the Mishnah is definitely not Rabbi Yehuda. Elamai, Rabbi Meir, you're going to say it's Rabbi Meir, Hai kol sha'a shemutar le'echol ma'achil. Why does it say every hour that it's permitted to eat, you can feed? It should say kol sha'a she'ochel ma'achil. Every hour you eat, you can feed. And as if it's totally dependent on your own eating, then it should just say, if you can eat, you can feed. Why did it add the words shemutar, that you're permitted to do this? So they say, because of that, Amar Rabba Bar Ula Matnitim Rabban Gamliel. If you remember, we already learned this. The Mishnah is Rabban Gamliel. It's not. What they're assuming is Kol she'ashem mutar le'echol must be referring to somebody else. When it's mutar for someone else to eat, then you can feed your animal, even though you yourself can't eat. What could that possibly refer to? Rabban Gamliel. If you remember, he had this third approach, which we didn't spend much time on, but Ditznam Rabban Gamliel Omer, Chulin Ne'echalin Kol Arba, Truma Chol Chamesh, Visorfim B'tchilat Shesh. So he said, regular people can eat till 4 hours into the day. Truma, because we don't want to burn truma if we don't have to, you get an extra hour to eat it. And then you burn the beginning of the 6th. V'hachi kamar, this is how the Mishnah reads. Kol sha'a shemutar le'echol kohen betruma Yisrael ma'achil chulin lebehema lechaya u'le'ofot. So long as the kohen still allowed to eat his truma, you can still give your animal food. Okay. Now, Yisrael ma'achil chulin, it should say Yisrael ma'achil chulin, period. Okay? Even though it is lebehema lechaya u'le'ofot. So now the Gemara says, right? Or actually, you could probably read it both ways. Period. Now it says, why did it have to say behema and chaya, and then later we'll ask also en ofot? Why domesticated, then non-domesticated, and then birds, right? Could have just said one. So they say sricha. To eat tana behema, you need it all. Why? If it had just said domesticated, now each one does something different with their food. If you leave it, chazela. Aval chaya, right? If you leave it for them, what will happen? They'll eat it right away. Aval chaya di mishayra kamatzna emalo. But if you give it to a non-domesticated animal, they're likely going to put it aside and save it for later. The regular animal who lives in your house knows they're getting food. So normally you give them food, they eat it. But if you have an animal who lives in the wild, they often store their food. So you might have thought maybe you can't give it to an animal that's going to store the food because maybe it's still considered your food and your food is still in existence. Comes to teach you, no, you're allowed to. Even if he might put it aside, because again, it's no longer yours. What if you set it by undomesticated animals? And then you know, even if they hide it, it's allowed, of course, then for other animals. So mishum di'im mishayra mihat mitzna ava behema dinim zimnin de mishayra v'lo masik adate v'kayale bebal yereho bal yematzeh. Well, let's take that logic even farther. If undomesticated animals, we expect that they might put it aside, then but I'll make sure that I do beetle so that I have no responsibility for it at all. Like let's say they're going to hide it in my house still. But if I give it to one of my animals who live in my house, I'm going to assume that they're going to eat it right away. So I'm not even going to think to do beetle and nullify it. Therefore, there's more of a concern by a behema that maybe he'll end up putting it away and I won't know, and then I'll be in trouble. By the way, there's a big question asked here. What about our chulda? Remember, after you do bedika chametz, you have to hide it because maybe the chulda will find it and hide it in a corner. So why are we not worried about chayot, but we are worried about the chulda? So many people say that the chaya here, we're talking about this. It's a good question. Okay, let's just put it out there. But one of the possible answers, the Rush answers that for the chulda, you don't know that the chulda takes it. When you give it to the chaya, you're putting it right in front of them. So you see what they're doing with it. So you know exactly where it is and what the situation is, and then you'll do beetle. Here we're concerned that the chulda might take it and you might not know where, you wouldn't even know that the chulda took it. And therefore there's more reason for concern there because you're not actually putting it in front of them. But anyway, it's a good question how these two sugyot connect or relate to each other. Okay, next. Okay, what about emalot, sricha? Okay, so that's why you need both. Ofot lamali. So what about birds? Once you figure out chayot and behemot, that should include birds. They say, I did tana behema v'chayat, tana nami ofot. This is like a threesome that goes together. So once you have behemot and chayot, they added ofot, but there's really nothing exceptionally new in that law. Umochro lenochri. Okay, so now you can sell your chametz to a nochri. By the way, this is what we do, right? This is just saying if you want, you can sell your chametz. The Mishnah is right, just saying if you want to if you still have some chametz around and instead of burning it, you want to sell it, go for it. You can still do it in the time before chametz becomes forbidden, before you have to burn it. But now the Gemara says, okay, but what we do, right? This is what we do. We do mechirat chametz. We sell it to a non-Jew. And we're going to see. So first the Gemara says pshita. First of all, isn't this totally obvious that you can sell it to a non-Jew? Why wouldn't you be able to? So they say, well, actually, the reason why it's not so obvious is because there is a Tana who says you can't do this. Let's see. Lafuke mehai Tana. To say that we don't agree, this mission doesn't agree with the following Tana. Ditanya, as it says in a Braita, Beit Shammai omrim, lo yimkor adam chemtzo lenochri, this is a fascinating halacha, and it might remind you a little bit about Shabbat. We learned about not loaning objects like animals to non-Jews because they're going to work the animals on Shabbat, and people will say, oh, your non-Jew is your animal is working on Shabbat. I think it's connected with you. There's even issues of selling them right before Shabbat. Anyway, here, they say you can't sell chametz to a nachri unless to a Gentile, unless you know that they're going to finish all the chametz before Pesach. So therefore, our Mishnah goes against Beit Shammai, because our Mishnah says, right, clearly they're not going to finish this chametz right before the time that it's forbidden, because it's already chametz is forbidden. So Beit Hillel omrim kol she'ah shemutar lechol mutar linkor. Anytime that you can eat. That you can eat, you're allowed to sell, even if they're not going to finish it. Okay, so again, you're allowed to do it, kol od, you're allowed to eat. Once you can't eat, you can't sell it anymore. Rabbi Yehuda ben Betecha omer, kutach, v'kol minei kutach, asur limkor 30 yom kodem lePesach. Kutach was a certain dip that they had. We've seen this before. It kind of sounds disgusting. It's sour milk, kind of like a yogurt thing maybe, mixed with, there was some moldy bread in it. It actually sounds a little bit like a yogurt culture. And then it had so because it had bread in it, it's chametz, but it stayed for a very long time. Okay, it was something that lasted a long time. So therefore he says, in the Beit Shammai mode, he says, any kind of kutach you can sell for 30 days or more within 30 days before Pesach, because the assumption is that they will still have that over Pesach. Okay, so this obviously is against what we do, where we hold like Beit Hillel, that as long as you can sell your chametz, as long as you're allowed to eat. Once you can't eat chametz anymore, you can't sell your chametz anymore, but you can sell your chametz to a Gentile before that time, and therefore that's what we do, and we do that, but it's interesting, the Beit Shammai disagrees with that entirely. Mutar b'hana'ah, it's permitted to benefit from. So the Gemara says, pshita, isn't this obvious? And this is what I said when we read the Mishnah. We already learned that you can feed it to your animals, and we already learned that you can give it to a Gentile, you can sell it. So of course you could benefit, that's benefit. So lo tzricha shecharacho kodem zmano. Let's say you burnt it before the time of chametz was allowed, and now it's not before it was forbidden to eat chametz. Now it's burnt chametz. Now burnt chametz is not chametz anymore; it's just burnt stuff. So chamash valan kiderava. Okay, what they're saying is you can benefit from the burnt charred chametz. And as Rava says, da'amarava characho kodem zmano mutar b'hana'a afilu la'achar zmano. Now you learn once, let's say the reverse. Once Pesach kicks in and you leave chametz over and you have to burn it, you can't benefit from that anymore, because then you're benefiting from chametz that was forbidden to you on Pesach. But if you burn it before it's forbidden to eat, and you want to use the charred pieces for whatever you might use it for, again, it's not the most useful item, but you could maybe use it for a fire or something, then if you did it before the time it was forbidden to eat chametz, then it's allowed. Okay, next section. Avar zmano asur b'hana'ato. So now once chametz is forbidden, then you can no longer benefit. So the Gemara says, pshita. Of course, this is obvious again. Again, we say, what's the chiddush here? We know this. Lo tzricha l'sha'ot rabbanan. To Amar, okay, what they're trying to teach you is, once it's forbidden by rabbinic law, you already can't benefit. You might have thought maybe only the isur hana'ah, the forbidden, the fact that one cannot benefit is only once the D'Oraita law kicks in at midday. But what about an hour before, according to Rabbi Meir, or 2 hours before, according to Rabbi Yehuda? Maybe then you'd be allowed to benefit. So they come to tell you, no, the Sha'ot Rabbanan are a problem. And how do we know this? Amar Rav Gidel, Amar Rav Chia Bar Yosef, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. We actually learned this also. HaMekadesh Mishesh Sha'ot Famala. If someone betroths a woman earlier in the day, right, from 6 hours and later, or lamala, afilu b'chitei, starting from the beginning of the 6th hour, afilu b'chitei kordanita en chosheshin l'kiddushin. Even if they use wheat kernels that are very hard and are very unlikely to leaven, still you're not allowed to do that. And we actually assume, and this we said was a big deal, because this means normally we're always extra concerned about kiddushin, that maybe she's an eshet ish and the woman's already designated to this man, and therefore it's adultery if anyone else sleeps with her. We say no. We assume this is not kiddushin at all, because you have to benefit. You can't benefit from chametz even once the isur d'Rabbanan, once it's forbidden by rabbinic law to benefit from chametz. Lo yasik bo tanur v'kirayim. You can't light up a fire with this. So again, once it's forbidden b'hana'ah, you can't benefit from it. Obviously, you can't use it for an oven, to burn a fire, pshita. So they say, lo tzricha, it's needed for what? The Rabbi Yehuda, according to Rabbi Yehuda Da'amar, that we saw in the Mishnah, ein bior chametz ela sreifa, sal kadat hachamina. You might have thought, ho'il v'amar Rabbi Yehuda mitzvato b'tzreifa, b'hadei dekasarif le litane minei, kamash malam. You might have thought that since Rabbi Yehuda says the mitzvah to do it, the way to do the mitzvah is through burning, you might have thought that while you're burning it, you're allowed to benefit from it. Kamash malam, therefore comes to teach you that that is not the case. The background to this issue is that there's 2 types of things that need to be destroyed. There's things that get burnt, and there's things that just need to be destroyed because they're forbidden to benefit from. And those generally we bury. Things that we bury, the ashes are forbidden. That's why we bury them. Things that we burn, you're usually allowed to use the ashes. So this comes to tell you that you might have thought that since Rabbi Yehuda thinks the mitzvah is burning, you might be allowed to use the ashes and benefit from them. This specifically comes to teach you that that is not the case. Okay, next. Amar Chizkiah. Minayim l'chametz b'Pesach she'asur b'hana'ah. Okay, now we're starting the next section, which is based on what we just said, that chametz on Pesach is forbidden b'hana'ah. So how do we know that you can't benefit from chametz on Pesach? Shne'emar lo yochal chametz. Okay, here, this is a pasuk from Shmot. It says, no, wrong pasuk. Yeah, Vayomer Hashem Moshe. Zachor et hayom hazeh asher yatsatem miMitzrayim. Yeah, it is. Shmot Yud Gimel pasuk Gimel. Moshe says to the people, remember this day, that this is the day you got out of Egypt. Mi beit avadim, from slavery. Ki b'chozek yad hotzi Hashem etchem mizeh, because with a strong hand God took you out. But lo ye'achel chametz. Sorry, it's not lo yochal, it's lo ye'achel. So now, what do we learn from the lo ye'achel? This isn't like the yitma yitame, that it's read as yitma, but we darshan yitame. This is read as ye'achel. It will not be eaten. Okay, not just don't eat chametz, but it will not be eaten. So what did they learn from that? Instead of saying lo yochal, it says lo ye'achel, it will not be eaten by you. Lo yehebo heter achila. That means it will not be eaten in any form. What other form could it be eaten in? Let's say you don't eat it. Let's say you sell it. And then you take that money and you buy cottage cheese with it. That's also considered having eaten chametz because you're benefiting from it. That's what lo ye'achel comes to teach you. So now they say, okay, well, let's infer from here. Tamag katav Rachmana lo ye'achel chametz. Ha lo katav lo ye'achel. In other words, the reason is because it says lo ye'achel. What if it hadn't said that? Hava mina isur achila mashma, isur na'al lo mashma? Or maybe it's really a statement. It's saying what one can infer from what he just said is that if it didn't say ye'achel and it just said don't eat, you would have thought, the halacha would have been, forget what you have thought. The halacha would have been no eating, but you can benefit. Only because it says lo ye'achel does it mean it's also forbidden by benefit. Well, why are they pointing this out? Because this disagrees with Rabbi Avau. Pliga de Rabbi Avau. To Amar Rabbi Avau said, Kol makom shenemar lo yochal, lo tochal, lo tochlu. Anytime in the Torah where it says don't eat something in the form of yochal, tochal, right? Yochal is not you. Lo yochal chametz, lo tochal chametz. Actually, yochal is to him, tochal is to you, and lo tochlu, you can't eat chametz. In plural, echad isur achila ve'echad isur hana'a mashma. Okay, we're going to assume basic lo tochal means everything, benefit and eating. Ad sheparet lecha katuv kederech sheparet lecha b'nevela, unless the Torah specifies that you're permitted to benefit. So basically, we're saying that Rabbi Avau disagrees with what we saw, what Chizkiah said, because Chizkiah said it's only because of the special way of reading it does it mean also benefit. But if it was just written regular, it wouldn't mean benefit. And Rabbi Avau says the opposite. It says everywhere it says don't eat, it means also don't benefit. Only by nevela where it's specified, or anything like nevela where it's specified. What's nevela? Nevela is a dead carcass. So now we're going to see two different ways of darshaning nevela. Okay, there's two different verses they're going to learn from, each opinion, Ditanya. But both of them are going to show that it's just by nevela and not by, and unless it specifies that you're permitted to benefit. By nevela, it's going to say you can't eat, but you can benefit. If it doesn't say that, then it means everything, both eating and benefiting, and that goes against Chizkiah. So let's read the Braita. Lo tochlu kal nevela, don't eat any nevela. Okay, first we're quoting a pasuk from Dvarim. Okay, the last book of the Torah, Sefer Perek Yudalid pasuk kaf aleph. Lo tochlu kol nevela. Okay, you can't eat any dead animal, an animal that wasn't slaughtered properly, it dies on its own. Lager asher b'sharecha titnena. So what should you do with it? Right now, it's going to tell you, give it to a ger who lives among you. Okay, someone who keeps, usually we mean this is someone who keeps the 7 Noachide laws, the Sheva Mitzvot B'nai Noach. Ve'achala, and he can eat it. Or sell it to a Gentile. Those are both ways you can get benefit. Giving a gift to someone is a benefit, and selling it to someone is a benefit. Ainli ella. Now, here's a drasha on this verse. So first of all, that shows you the nevela specifically is permitted to benefit from, but anything else we would assume not. So now, notice what it says here. They said give it to a ger and sell it to a Gentile. So it says from here, sounds like you can only give it to a gift to a ger or sell it to a Gentile. But ger lemechira minayin, how do we know that you're allowed to sell it also to a ger? So they say Talmud Lomar, and they basically punctuate the verse differently. It says the pasuk reads. Sorry, I'm looking for it. Here. Lager asher b'sharecha titnena va'achala o machor lenochri ki am kadosh ata. Right? Where do you put the break there? Either give it to the ger, or sell it to the Gentile. But what they say is read the verse like this. Okay, Talmud Lomar, lager asher b'sharecha titnena o machor. Okay, it's saying give it to the ger in your gate or sell it. Stop. Then the second part goes to the nochri. Now, obviously, you'd have to read the verse twice with the break being there and the break being earlier. Otherwise, the nochri doesn't make any sense either. So lenochri b'netina minayin. So now we'll see how they're going to break the verse differently to show that you can also give it as a gift to a Gentile. Talmud Lomar titnena va'achala. In other words, again, they say, there's lager asher b'sharecha, stop. Titnena, give it to him, or sell it to the Gentile. So basically what they're saying is, even though clearly the simple way of reading it is not to split it that way, they're basically saying you could put a break anywhere you want in the verse, and then both verbs go together with one subject, okay, either with the ger or with the Gentile, and therefore you can read it like that. So Rabbi Meir says, you can learn from this verse again. This is an aside. It doesn't have to do with our topic. Our topic was just, here we see you can benefit from it. But now they're saying, how can you benefit? Either way you want for either person. But Rabbi Yehuda disagrees. Rabbi Yehuda omer dvarim kechtavan, leger b'netina o lenochui b'mechira. Specifically, each one in its own way. My time of Rabbi Yehuda. Isak da'atach k'd'amar Rabbi Meir lichtav rachmana leger b'sher b'sharecha titnena v'achala u'machol o lamali shma mina l'dvarim kechtavan. He says, if Rabbi Meir was right, it shouldn't use the word or in the middle. It just should have said, okay, so, and sell to a Gentile. And then it would have been clear this is all one and the same. But the word or really seems to split the verse into two. For Rabbi Meir, what does he do with the word O? He wanted to split it to show, ideally, really you should give it to the ger as a gift. Okay, why is that? Because we're commanded to support the ger. So we should, ideally, that's what you should do with it. But if you don't do that, then your second option is to sell it to a Gentile. For Rabbi Yehuda, lo tzarich kra. Ha lo tzarich kra. You don't even need a pasuk to tell you that. Kevan de ger atam tzuvel achioto. V'nochli atam tzuvel achioto. Lo tzarich kra svarahu. He says, I don't need the verse to tell me that. I don't need the word O to teach me that. I know that. Our mitzvah, we're commanded to take care of the gerim. We're not commanded to take care of Gentiles. Okay, our main commandment is for the gerim, the people who are keeping the 7 Noachide laws. Those people were commanded to take care of and sustain. That's why it's obvious, and you don't need the verse to tell you that. So therefore, O is free for him to teach you that it's also, right, according to him, O is to teach you that it's specifically this or that and no combination. Bishlam Rabbi Meir, Da'amal echad ger ve'echad nochli, bein b'mechira, bein b'netina. So Rabbi Meir, who says either one is allowed, right? The fact that we needed this verse to teach us that nevela is permitted, ha kol isurin shel Torah asurin bein ba'achila bein b'hana'ah. So according to Rabbi Meir, who basically says, right, you can do either this, you can do anything to anybody, right? You can give it as a gift or sell it to either which one of them. So it's understandable why we say whether, right, you need a pasuk to teach you that nevela is permitted to benefit from. And therefore, from here, we can learn to all Yisurin Shabbat Torah, because there's no other special law here other than you can benefit from it any way you want. Give it as a gift, sell it, whatever you want. But Rabbi Yehuda Amar Lidvarim Kichtavanu Data. But according to Rabbi Yehuda, who says specifically, this verse is telling you a very specific law. Either give it to the Gentile by selling, or give it to a ger as a gift. That the whole halacha was to teach you specifically that, not to teach you laws in general about whether you can benefit or not. So therefore, how do we know that everything else where it says don't eat is forbidden b'hana'ah? Remember, Rabbi Meir says there's no special law here. It's just a matter of, these are just options. You can sell it. You can give it as a gift. Anything you want to do. That's all. To really what the pasuk is coming to teach you is you can benefit. Meaning not anywhere else, only because here the Torah said you can benefit. Every other time where it says don't eat, it means don't eat and don't benefit. Right? And that was all Rabbi Avau, who went against Chizkiah. But according to Rabbi Yehuda, if he learns this pasuk to say specifically a ger to give and a nochri to sell, then you can't learn about Isurei Hana'ah in general from here. So where does he learn it from? Nafkalimi lakelev tishlechunoto. Okay, we're going to say, lakelev tishlechunoto is a different verse. This is a verse in Sefer Shmot, pasuk Kaf Bet in Parshat Mishpatim. It says, basar b'sadeh trefa lo tochlu. If you just find a piece of meat in the field, don't eat it. Like the animal just died. Lakelev tishlechunoto. You can give it to your dog. That means you can benefit because you can give it to your dog. Okay, and that means, again, only here are you allowed to benefit, not anywhere else. So that's where Rabbi Yehuda will learn it from. And again, those were two different explanations of Rabbi Avau, which came to say that he disagrees with Chizkiah. Chizkiah said, no, only because it says lo ya'achel do we mean also Isur Hana'ah. But if it had just said lo yochal, it would have just meant only eating is forbidden. Okay, there's another issue, which I'm not going to get into, which is the Isur of lo techanem. The Torah says you're not allowed to give free gifts to Gentiles. So how does Rabbi Meir allow us to give the nevela as a gift? Okay, I'll leave that as a question. If you have time over Shabbat, you can look it up. Tov, Shabbat Shalom, Shavua Tov. Bye, and Chanukah Sameach.